Thank you, everyone. Good to see your smiling faces. Thank you for joining this webinar, this discussion on team development and a demo of an assessment tool that provides a practical tool that you can implement with your teams to increase their effectiveness and communication pretty much right away with minimal investment of time and money. We will discuss why teams need development in the first place, why all of you joined this. We will talk about the key areas of focus for effective teams, what's lacking, what do teams gain by going through the team development experience, and how to maximize the working relationship between each team member of the group, leveraging their strengths, mitigating weaknesses, and how to work better together as individuals and as a team, as a cohesive unit. There will be a couple of interactive exercises or interactions and questions, Q&A sessions. So as I said before, there will be a lot of information to cover. I run these webinars not as a webinar, but as a meeting for the purpose of live interaction with all participants. So I will rely on you to mute yourselves if you expect any distractions and background noise, and unmute yourself if you have questions, if you want to jump in. You can certainly use the chat to submit your questions, raise your hand, and I can definitely stop and or I can let you know when I can take your question. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Tatiana St. Germain. I am an executive coach and talent advisor with Great People Management, which is a talent management consulting company that has been passionately helping organizations select, develop, and keep amazing people. This is what we do, and I've been doing this for the past 20 years. As I mentioned, this is going to be an interactive session. The first interaction you can go ahead and participate in is pulling out your phone and connecting with me on LinkedIn using this QR code. I know most presenters might frown upon attendees using their phones during the webinar, but I will be asking you to keep it handy for the upcoming interactive activities. So please connect with me on LinkedIn and keep this information if you have any questions. I will also bring this slide up at the very end. So let's jump right in. The first question, there's a good reason why everyone is here on this webinar, and there's a good reason why we had so many registrations and people reached out with questions and requests to conduct this session in the future because they could not participate in this one. So let's talk about what do great teams have in common? This is the first question that I have for you. If you've ever been on a great team, high functioning, high performing team, what did you find great teams had in common? And I will show the responses here. All right. Smiler, could you tell me if the responses are on the screen? Can you see it?
Yes, it's on the screen.
Okay, perfect. Respect, communication, trust, vision, mutual respect, recognition, results, goals, commitment. I like that. Profitable. We all come to work and work together in order to achieve results at the end of the day, not just to get together and have fun, although fun is a key component of a great team. Goals, results, perfect. Thank you for participating in this poll. And I agree with communication, as you saw on the slide, was top priority. And I think communication during our conversation today is going to be, it's going to keep coming back up to the top of the list. According to Patrick Lencioni, and his work and 5 dysfunctions of the team. Teams need to trust one another. Trust has to be one of the key components. They need to be honest, transparent. They need to be able to openly communicate with one another and trust each other's intentions. That's another critical idea here. They need to be able to engage in conflict. If we don't always agree, so when we disagree, do we trust each other enough to be able to agree and disagree in a productive way and discuss different ideas? But great ideas mean nothing without commitment. And I often coach my clients on the what by when strategy. And that strategy must be implemented at every meeting. This is what I recommend, every single meeting. If you want the discussion that you're having during the meeting with your team to tie to the actual results, the what by when strategy. Part of that strategy also includes by whom. So together we can create a clear expectation of what needs to happen by what date, and who is responsible for that action item. And that's the transparency and visibility, and that's what builds accountability on the team. Just mute everyone to make sure we don't have any background noise. So commitment to decisions, accountability, as I mentioned, and at the end of the day, results, which is one of the things that you mentioned as well when I asked you the question about what great teams have in common. And it's key regardless of where team members are located, regardless of their individual functions. The reason we come together is to achieve results. So given what we've discussed up to this point, what is missing on your team? We know what great teams have in common. Use this QR code to participate. What brought you here? Perhaps you have experience being on a not so productive team, not such a great team. Or maybe you're on such a team right now. So what is missing on your team? And what brings you to this session? Collaboration. Okay. Lack of trust. I always love working with teams who come to me, not because there's a problem, but because they're so great, they're afraid of their own greatness, and they want to keep getting better and better. Common vision, resources, collaboration, creativity, misunderstanding, growth mindset. Thank you all for participating. And I do see collaboration and communication and accountability as one of the top reasons that break or make a team. Awesome. Let's get back to presentation. You can still participate, continue adding your responses. You're not limited. So the reason all of that is important, everything that you mentioned that might be missing on your team and the reasons where you joined this conversation, is because it's not only demoralizing for individual team members to be on a team that's not productive, that doesn't communicate, and there's finger pointing and backstabbing and lack of trust and lack of fun. And people just don't enjoy coming to work to see those individuals. It also impacts the bottom line. Statistics are pretty staggering, and I don't need to go through all of them, but the fallout of poor teamwork is pretty impressive. When people don't communicate, they're not effective. It costs organizations a lot of money, and I can provide this information to you after the presentation. When there is what we're seeing is that there's no trust, there's no commitment, there's no accountability. And again, the percentages, the statistics are pretty staggering. They, of course, impact retention because people don't leave they don't leave companies, and they don't leave organizations. They don't leave people, they leave impersonal, disconnected, and dysfunctional. workplaces. So we need to make sure that we create connections. One last interactive activity here. Have you ever been part of a winning team? And what are some of the components of a winning team, high-performing team checklist? I will give you a QR code in just a moment. But these are the ones that we've collected over the years. Teams are excited to work together because they fit their roles and they're fully engaged. They're aligned in focus, purpose, and priorities, which is something that you guys mentioned in the poll as well. They leverage each other's strengths without judging weaknesses. That's a key component here too. They understand how their work supports the organizational mission. They understand their roles and responsibilities very clearly. They manage conflict well. They hold each other accountable without hierarchical enforcement. These are self-accountable teams. They can be highly functioning and high-performing teams, but they also need to be self-accountable teams. They set clear expectations. They foster improvement, constructive feedback, trust, and appreciate each other's roles, and embrace diverse perspectives and diverse opinions. What I'd like to ask you is, as you look at this checklist, what is the common thread? What is the common theme here? What is the one thing that you can do to impact pretty much all of these components? If you were to pick one. Support. Okay. What else? Appreciation, communication, clear expectations. What I hear from my clients when I work with them, yes, leadership. Communication, I guess the response I was trying to lead you guys to was communication. Because if we go back to the slide in this checklist, you will see that none of these things can be achieved without clear communication. Now, how we communicate and how we listen is greatly impacted by our personal traits, by our beliefs, our fear, our ego, our natural tendencies and knee-jerk reactions. And if we don't communicate well, we cannot be aligned in focus and purpose and priorities. If we don't communicate, we cannot show appreciation. That's a way of that's one of the ways to communicate. We cannot set clear expectations, and we cannot provide support, and we cannot resolve conflict productively. So communication is extremely important. And when I talk about communication in my coaching practice and in my team development practice as well, I find that there's two big components to it, and they probably sound to you kind of counterintuitive, to each other. It starts with you, and yet not everything is about you. It's easy to get trapped in your own mind. My husband said one time that we're all ships in our own bottles. So it's like an echo chamber sometimes. So you have to really practice listening, what you hear, and what is it that you say? What do you do with communication when it comes to starting with you? It's about you. It's about how you talk. So starting with you, it's about how you talk. Once again, not everything is about you, is about how you listen. So it's about how you talk and how you listen. So starting with you, just to give you, I'm not going to give you the full coaching session on this, But there's some key components here that I can mention. Starting with you, always pause to check yourself. What did you hear? What did you assume? And remember the perspective, because you can both be right. And then your discussion with another person or with a group of people on your team is more about seeking a solution. It's more about the search for the truth and the big picture. And it's not a confrontation and it's not a judgment call. So once again, what did you hear and what did you assume? And then not everything is about you. It's about how you listen. Do you often assume that the words spoken by someone during a conversation are intended to hurt you, or intended to expose you, intended to question you? Those are assumptions. So observe yourself again, pause, and remind yourself that people say things for their own reasons, and you cannot control the uncontrollable. Remember the perception, remember the perspective, look in the mirror, be curious often, ask questions often, pause, be grounded, be fully present in all conversations. This is probably one of my favorite slides about perspective, because depending on where you're standing, both answers are correct. Is it a square, or is it a circle, or is it actually a cylinder? Or I guess the square might be a rectangle. Could be a rectangle, again, depending on where you stand. In order to improve communication, awareness is key. You need to know yourself, self-awareness, and you need to be keenly aware of others without judgment. And this is what's going to produce better results. But the next question is, okay, Tatiana, everything makes sense so far. So why don't people just get along? Well, we're all different people. Nobody really knows another human being, and you only know the experience of another person. But I don't know you and you don't know me. I just know the story I tell myself based on my experience and based on my observations of you. But I truly never know you. And so this is where I have to check my assumptions at the door when I come in to talk to you, or when you and I are part of a team conversation. We are all different. We all come to this world and to the workplace with our own set of predispositions, tendencies, strengths, weaknesses, quirks of personality. It's a unique set of data that we're lacking in the workplace when humans come together. Somehow we're expected to read people, and many people will claim that they have this intuitive sense and they're able to read people. I have doubts about that, but maybe because I'm a very skeptical person. That's just my tendency. So I will always question people. So let's remember that everyone comes with their own occupational DNA. And how they come into the workplace and how they behave is going to be impacted by their ego, by their emotions, their fears, their biases, their beliefs. I have a whole session on biases. It's quite fascinating how we're psychologically wired for certain things. And those beliefs and biases and fears create habits. So when people tell me, well, Tatiana, this is just who I am, then you deal with it. Or my team has to deal with it. It's especially happens at the leadership level. No, that I disagree respectfully. This is not who you are. This is how you learn to be in most cases. We're all reasonable people. And you want to be able to take a look at ourselves in the mirror and see what are some of the tendencies that we naturally possess that serve us and which ones don't serve us in achieving the results and creating an amazing team, leading an amazing team, creating the environment where every team member is motivated. Because remember, the job of the leader is not to motivate people. The job of a leader on the team is to create the environment in which teams are self-motivated, because motivation is internal. You cannot control the uncontrollable, as I said before, and people are that uncontrollable factor in your life and in business. So, to the solution. About 10% of every person that you
90%
meet.
of a person's potential is below.
But Smile, I'm just making sure that everybody's muted. Let's make sure everybody's muted. So when we look at these individuals, because only 10% of a person can be observed by an untrained eye. 90% of the person, like in the case of the iceberg, lies beneath the water surface. This is the 90% of human potential. Yes, the strengths and the weaknesses and quirks of personality, but also the potential that is dormant, perhaps undiscovered and unknown even to the person themselves. We're all different and unique, and we all contribute a variety of strengths and talents to the workplace. Another thing that leads to conflict on the team is when we look at each other and we see that we're different and we perceive each other's differences as difficulties. And they don't have to be difficulties. We often talk about dealing with difficult people at work. Well, they're not really difficult when it comes down to it, when we have a conversation about it. What we uncover is that they're simply different, could be drastically different. And so you start to make judgments about what's wrong with that person if they don't react to the same set of stimuli in the same way that you do. But I promise you, even what we might call the most difficult person on your team, they did not wake up in the morning with sole purpose to come to work and piss you off. That is unlikely. Most likely scenario, they're just different. And it takes a long time to get to know those differences, to kind of tease them out and to figure out how to work with somebody. In most cases, when I work with leaders, they tell me, well, I started and it took me about 6 months to get to know my team or to get to know my coworkers. And that's pretty much in line with some of the research and studies. Gallup mentions that too, that it takes about 6 months and up to 2 years to get to know someone at a proficient enough level where you can predict how they might react to different situations in the workplace that come up. And naturally, with remote teams, this might be extended. So we might be looking at a longer time frame, not 6 months, but maybe closer to a year. Most organizations and teams cannot afford to sit before they can be productive and wait for everyone to find ways to get along. Teams don't communicate well, and of course, when lack of understanding happens, it causes conflict because assumptions and judgments get in the way because we perceive our differences as difficulties. We need to know the information about what lies beneath the water surface for each person because it gives us a deeper level of understanding at the very beginning. So you don't have to wait 6 months to 2 years to get to know your teammates. When you join a team, what if you had the tool to know your people you work with, or if you're a leader of a team and you're taking over an existing team, what if you had this information at your fingertips in the first 2 weeks and you got to know people at their deepest level, the 90% of the total person that they themselves may not be aware of? This is what helps you maximize these working relationships and also your leadership effectiveness and helps you ensure team excellence. PXT Select Assessment is what I use with my clients to uncover this information, to uncover this potential. We talk about strengths and weaknesses. It is a data point in all human decisions in the workplace, from hiring to development to onboarding and retirement. It provides reliable information beyond what you would typically uncover through day-to-day activities. And that's exactly what I was talking about. So I'd like to share some actual screenshots to show you what it looks like when we apply this in practical application, really, because this information is power. I often use this phrase in my team workshops. When we know each other at a deeper level and we truly understand what each person on the team brings to the table, then we don't focus on individual weaknesses. In fact, because we talk so much about different strengths on the team, individual weaknesses become irrelevant when you work on a complementary team. So you start to complement each other. And this is what makes amazing teams. What does PXT Select measure? First of all, it's a highly sophisticated psychometric assessment tool. It takes about an hour to complete. There are many components to it. There's 6 measurements on a scale from 1 to 10. We have 5 cognitive measurements that give us information about how a person talks and thinks, how they problem solve, how they reason. Behavioral traits, this is often where we focus the most of our time during team workshops, because this is where rubber meets the road. We talked about those observable behaviors. These are driven by these traits. Depending on what preferences a person has, their knee-jerk reactions are going to manifest in behavior. And this is critical. Behaviors can be adapted. They can be coached. What I recommend the teams that I work with and individual leaders that I work with is that they focus on adapting behaviors and not on changing people. People don't like to be changed. And in fact, they can be fearful when they come into sessions as team development workshops or coaching engagements, because they feel like, oh, somebody's here to tell me what to do and how to be a different person that I'm not. And that's not the case, because it's counterproductive. It's not going to create transformation of behavior. We don't want to change who you are. We want to change what you do. But it starts with information. You need to know what your style is, what your behavioral traits are, what your tendencies are. And the third component that we measure on PXT Select is motivations. What brings people to work? And not only that, what gets people out of bed in the morning? What keeps them engaged in life? And if we can find an outlet for those motivations, those interests and hobbies at work, maybe even once a year, it's amazing what people can do when they're motivated to come to work. This is when they give the discretionary effort at work. As I mentioned, it's a sophisticated psychometric assessment tool, and it measures 20 traits on a scale from 1 to 10, and it helps us understand how we learn and communicate, how we react to the environment, and what activities motivate us. So what we do for real life application, I recently conducted a team development workshop with a social media company, and we had 15 people on the team, including the leaders, 2 CEOs. Everybody on the team took the assessment. We assessed individuals to identify their strengths and weaknesses, and a team report for each team member was generated, identifying areas where they're different from the rest of their team. And the language on the report gives information about how different we are, what is that behavioral diversity on the team, how this you as an individual who's part of the team fits into that behavioral diversity, and how to work together, how to navigate our differences, and how to communicate better and create better behaviors on the team. And then the team workshop is where I come in and facilitate, typically in person, but I often do it virtually as well, because we have teams that are scattered all over the country and sometimes even the globe. So everyone joins in, and we bring all this information together to have an in-depth group coaching conversation. In the beginning, teams shy away from sharing their information, and my intent is not to put anybody on the spot, but as I explain what we're talking about individual strengths and weaknesses and the key behaviors that contribute to productive communication, this is when they start to understand themselves a little bit better, and they start to contribute to the conversation. And they start to bring up examples of where they miscommunicated or misunderstood someone on the team in the past, and now they understand it. and they understand why this happened. So this is an example of a team taken directly from the team report. So in this example, we only have 6 people on the team, and we're only looking at behaviors. The distribution of team members on each of the behaviors is shown here. For example, in sociability, we have people all over from reserved to outgoing approach. We also have some diversity on outlook. We have folks who are skeptical, who question other people's outcomes, other people's motives and project outcomes, all the way to trusting. We have a couple of people who are more on the trusting side. They're more optimistic and they believe in others more than others believe in themselves. So they're the balcony people, I call them. They cheer people on, they cheer the team on. On decisiveness, we have quite a bit of diversity. So as we go through all of that, we start to see some patterns that contribute to productive discussions, because now you can see where procrastination might be happening and why, and who should be responsible for a particular action item on the team. This way you can use these data points to actually assign certain action items to people who are aligned with, in their strengths, are aligned with that action item. You don't want to assign, let's say, a sensitive, time-sensitive project to someone who is very deliberate in their decisiveness approach, or someone who is very steady and methodical and lower on pace, and they prefer to focus on quality of work instead of quantity of work. It is very important to recognize the strengths people bring to the table and not judge their weaknesses. Every single person on the spectrum is challenged in their own ways, and they're talented in their own ways. And the conversation that we need to be having is about the talents on the team. How can we leverage the talents? I'm not saying we should ignore the weaknesses, but if you had a rabbit on your team and you had to win a running race, jumping and running race, wouldn't you want to put a rabbit on that team? Or are you going to put a fish on that team? Or conversely, if you have a swimming team, do you want to hire a rabbit to put on a swimming team? It's counterproductive. No matter how much coaching you give a rabbit, how many times you throw them in the lake, they're not going to be as good as even a mediocre fish. So knowing where talents are, you will be able to assign appropriate duties and responsibilities, roles, action items, what by when items to appropriate team members. And it's going to create accountability and transparency on the team too, because they will all know, okay, I'm talented in this, you're talented in this. So let's work together on this project, and you will do this component of it and I will do this component of it. That way you can ensure that your fish are swimming, your rabbits are running, not confusing the two. This is some of the narrative I wanted to show you that comes with the report. On Outlook, as I mentioned, we have skeptical people and then we have trusting people on the team. So what does Outlook look like for this team? And what are some of the points that you should consider when you're having team discussions? So we work through these team points to consider during the workshop, and then they come back to gather as a team once again to discuss this and create action items. Part of the action items is going to be tips for the team itself. When we look at averages, where we are on all of these behaviors, we may need to bring in a different perspective to the team. Maybe not for this team, but for other teams. If you have a highly skeptical team, everybody's on that skeptical side. Well, if you need to be innovative, let's say your team is charged with technology, AI implementation, robotics, some kind of innovation. While skeptical people can innovate, but they will think in terms of what can go wrong. You need to bring a different perspective on the trusting side. These individuals are naturally wired to see what we can do, what we can accomplish. What if this and what if that? And that provides counterbalance to the argument when you're evaluating it from different points of view. If we don't have this information, we throw optimists and pessimists in the same room together, they will start fighting because they perceive their own perspective as most valuable. But in fact, both perspectives are valuable. And when teams have these data points from PXT Select, they actually appreciate what the other person brings to the table. They go, oh, you're bringing this up because you're naturally wired to be skeptical. I appreciate it. Thank you. Or you're so trusting, not because you're you see the world through rose-colored glasses, maybe, but you want to bring a different perspective. You want to see what is possible, not how it can go wrong. And so at the end of the team workshop, the team will understand what is measured on the assessment. They walk away with key learning points about themselves. They get to know themselves better. And they also learn how to maximize each other, how to leverage each other's strengths, how to maximize the team report, how to know their teammates on a deeper level. As I mentioned, celebrating the strengths and the differences, identify diversity, behavioral diversity gaps and talent gaps. They get group coaching and they build an action plan that is going to be geared toward them, each individual person in the team and also team as a whole. So this is just an example of an action plan on communication. We want to utilize the KSS process. Keep doing, stop doing, start doing. Keep doing are the things that you're already doing well. For example, giving credit, expressing gratitude for this team. Stop assuming, that should be actually under stop doing. Stop assuming, stop being passive aggressive, that happened on that team. Stop judging. And what are some of the things that you wanted to implement in the start doing column? Start weekly meetings with my counterparts. Give immediate feedback, don't wait. Take 4 seconds before responding. So these were some of the individual action items that people took away. What's on your sticky note is an exercise I use in my coaching sessions. When there's so much going on and you need to focus and prioritize on something that needs to be done, use a sticky note. And I had some clients who use, I don't think I have a tiny one, but sticky notes come even in smaller size. But what is on your sticky note for today? And then have a quick huddle for 5 minutes to discuss what is it that you're working on? Tell me what, I'll tell you what I'm working on. You tell me what you're working on. What could derail it? And how can we help each other? This way, when your coworker comes to you with requests for help, you can kind of anticipate and you know it's a priority. Give immediate feedback and don't wait. That's absolutely key because people don't stick around anymore for an annual review. They don't even stick around for a quarterly review. So immediate feedback is extremely important. You can course correct very quickly and taking 4 seconds before responding. If you try it, if you've ever tried that golden silence, that's from Miller Heiman sales training, it is very difficult to do, to hold your tongue for 4 seconds. Try with 2 seconds and see what happens. Get grounded. This is how you create the space and time for yourself to become fully grounded and become present, become curious in a conversation, even the most contentious situations, even the ones that cause you to react emotionally to the conversation. Just try it. It can be awkward in the beginning, but it will open up a world of opportunities and viewpoints, and you will achieve better results talking to other people. All right, I'm going to open up for questions. You can ask questions about communication strategies, anything that I've covered up to this point, or about PXT Select. or your feedback. You can use the QR code or the chat if you're more comfortable with that. Well, it looks like we'll be done early. What I would like to offer you as a thank you for attending today is extend a special invitation for you to experience PXT Select that you can then later apply with your team or just use it for personal development. You can experience it free of charge or application. I will, if you just raise your hand and you, or email me back, however you want to communicate with me, I'm open. I will set you up for an assessment. We will schedule a debrief of the results, which will be more of an in-depth coaching kind of debrief. We can talk about your team's challenges and discuss what team in your organization could benefit from a team development project. Oh, we do have a question that popped into the chat. In teamwork, how will you deal with team members who appear too known and try to impede your leadership? It'd be helpful to have some context here, of course, but I'm assuming this question means when you're leading a team of individuals who have a lot of tenure and a lot of influence on the team. Is that what you're asking, Collins? Yeah. Yeah, it can be difficult. And it can probably cause you some imposter syndrome as a leader of such a team. You can look at those team members as valuable assets because they already have the influence and you can have the influence through them. Don't feel intimidated by them. These are your personal fears getting in the way of you being able to see a different path. So it's more about you, I would say, and I would challenge you to examine your feelings and your fears associated with that. And then it's also about them. How do they react to your leadership? Do they purposely undermine your authority in team environment? And then you can have a one-on-one conversation with them and explain talk about your expectations, but always focus on behavioral expectations. It shouldn't be a judgment call. So you don't want to pull somebody into your office and say, hey, you undermined me in this meeting. What's wrong with you? You know, just because you think you're all that. So that's not going to be productive because a person is going to become defensive in that situation. What you want to become is curious in that moment. So you schedule a one-on-one and you share your observations. Use that language with yourself inside your head when you're talking to yourself as you're processing what just happened. Ask yourself, what am I observing? What did I just see happen? And focus on that observable behavior. Then ask yourself, what is working for me and what is not working for me? And that's how you will conduct the conversation one-on-one with the individual who is what you're observing, quote unquote, undermining your authority. You say, I have observed XYZ in the last meeting, and I would like to discuss with you. What was your perspective? Ask them to provide feedback. Be open to their perception, their perspective. But at the end of the day, if you're the boss, you set the tone and you set behavioral expectations. And you can say in the future, when this happens, I expect you to do this. And then always close every meeting with the team or one-on-one with what, by when, by whom. Always get commitment. Without commitment, you cannot get any results. I appreciate the question. You're welcome. Anyone else? Questions? Well, perfect. I really appreciate you guys joining. And don't forget to connect. Don't forget to raise your hand to experience PXT Select yourself or with your team. And you know where to find me. Join us for future webinars. Follow us on LinkedIn. We always try to put out great content related to leadership, teamwork, and great people in the workplace. Have a great day, everyone.